Welcome to Inside Tacoma. I'm Elisa O'Hanlon, and today my guest is new council member Kristina Walker. Hi, Kristina.
Hi.
I should call you Councilmember Walker. I messed this up with Councilmember Hines too.
I'm still getting used to it.
Thank you for your graciousness. We're excited to have you. How do you feel?
Thanks for having me. Good. Feeling like I'm getting settled in and figuring out where everything is and what my schedule is.
Yeah.
Figuring out which committee meetings I'm going to and those kind of things. But really getting settled in and really excited about getting to work.
Yeah. You found your parking place.
Well, I have not driven yet.
Because of course not.
I ride the bus.
Yes.
They do have a spot for me, which I'm sure I will use at some point, but...
Well, we'll talk about that some more. I mean, people who are familiar with you know about your background in transit and transportation and mobility, and so you're a huge advocate and influencer on that end. But let's just talk for a minute about how you have ended up in the seat. How was your year last year of campaigning?
Yeah, so I spent a good portion of 2019 on the campaign trail, as it were. It was about, I filed in February, really started the campaign in March. So March through mid-November, working on the campaign and doorbelling, walking every inch of the city, which I keep telling people the campaign is the best training for the job. But as I have just started the job, don't quote me on that yet, right? But it really was such a great way to get to know people across the city, but also to feel the neighborhoods of the city, to walk them and to see the inequities of our investments just in sidewalks and trees. Because we were out there on the hottest days in the middle of the summer and the rainiest days of the fall. So you feel what the streets feel like and how safe it is to be on the streets, whether you're on foot or in a car. I mean, it really was a great way to get to know the city. And then talking to people at their doors, not asking them to come to you. I mean, the forums were good too, because you got into specific policy issues and people came out because they really are passionate and they really care. But when you go to people's house, I found people were really honest and really specific about what they were interested in or that they cared about. So it was really a great way to get to know the city and get a feel for the neighborhoods.
Yeah. So were there surprises or were you getting feedback that really kind of resonated with what your experience is?
Yeah, I don't think there were too many surprises. I mean, I don't think anyone would be surprised to hear that we have not built as many sidewalks in South Tacoma as we have in the North End. And I think most people would be excited to figure out how we fix that and reinvest in our all neighborhoods of Tacoma. So I think it was more about like really feeling that in a really human way rather than just the data on paper. So I don't think it was a surprise. I think I was surprised how many people answered their doors and how honest they were. I mean, that was a really nice surprise, was just to hear from people. And people were very, very thankful that candidates came to their door and that they cared. I mean, there were a number of people who said, oh gosh, we haven't had anyone come to our door in 10 years. I said, well, I'm really sad that that's the case, and I'm very proud to be the first person who's here. So I want to be able to continue to reach out to the public and talk to voters. And I've said too, I mean, that's a great way to get to know the voters, but there's a huge subset of our community that doesn't vote or isn't registered to vote. So I want to make sure, I mean, I represent all of Tacoma, not just the voters or not just my neighborhood. So making sure that I am figuring out ways to talk to everyone and then inspire more people to get involved.
Yeah. So. Well, and that's such a challenge. I mean, as a candidate, you put in, your days were how many hours?
8 hours at the doors.
Every day.
Yeah.
And, and you, besides serving part-time on the council, you do have a job that brings income in for your family. You have a family that you have to spend time with. And so it's a lot of hours.
Yeah.
I know that you have served on the Tacoma 2025 steering committee and Tacoma 2025 really I think the foundation was bringing our community together and saying what's the vision. So tell me a little bit more about that work.
I mean, I think serving on the Tacoma 2025 committee has been one of the highlights of my career the last few years, partly because it is a vision, and it is a vision that a lot of people came together to create. It isn't just the city folks putting things that feel good on paper.
Not just city staff saying this is what's good for
But there was a lot of buy-in, and then that committee was created so thoughtfully to represent a larger sector of the community. And so I felt like every time we came together, we really made progress.
How many folks on the committee?
Don't quote me on this, but I think we're 10 or 12. And so that work, for folks that don't know, that Tacoma 2025 is the vision for the city. And there are certain sort of buckets of work, but throughout the whole thing is this equity and involvement piece where it's about reaching more people that don't typically get involved, and then getting those folks to in turn get involved, serve on boards and committees and commissions, come to more public meetings. So we, as the city, need to break down those barriers to what is possible. So whether that's just the very basic, like providing food at public meetings to get people more involved, to thinking through the times of those and the location so that we're going to the community rather than asking them to come to us. So something I'm really passionate about, excited to, from the council point of view, move some of that work forward. I will miss serving on that committee because it is a fantastic group of people. But we have an amazing staff for that work as well. So I'm confident that we're really going to make some progress. And I'm sure you are well aware, but for folks that might be watching, the Tacoma Equity Index is something that came out of that work and other work at the city as well. And I think is making not only more stronger progress with Tacoma 2025, but is allowing everything else we do to be more based in this equity data. And so in my day job working on multimodal transportation, we've used that equity index to look at how we're investing and where we're investing in transportation infrastructure. So it's just a really awesome tool that I think we've just seen the beginning of what it could mean for the city.
And the index, is new for the city in the last year or two, and really taking data to analyze where have we underinvested in this community, and trying to correct that, because we know things like even underinvestment in sidewalks limits people's mobility to get from their home to the grocery store. And even those just might seem like minor barriers. Makes a big difference.
Big impacts. Big impacts on health, on access, on affordability, and then in turn in life expectancy, which is, huge. So you can really get deep into. And Tacoma 2025, it's interesting to think that that's only 5 years away. I know. So we've got work to do.
You've got some things to do. So that's one of the things that, will you continue to be connected into that as a councilwoman? Yeah,
well, my understanding is that this directs sort of the vision of the council as well. So when we have our council retreat, that it's really grounded in the work of Tacoma 2025. And in my mind, that's really just about steering the ship in the same direction. So it's not that we have to be put into any one bucket of work as council members, but that we connect it to the larger city's vision, which is ultimately what we were all elected to do, right? So I think that makes so much sense. And then it gets council and staff talking the same language and working with the community to meet a common goal. So
what are the other, let's go ahead and talk about your transportation background, because that is, in your profession, you have been the executive director of Downtown on the Go for 8
Yep, 8.5, almost 9 years.
So you've been really steeped in the transit and transportation and housing balance.
So Downtown on the Go is and was started really to focus on walking, biking, and transit, and really specific to supporting our downtown businesses and how employees get to work. We still do that, but we've broadened our scope a little bit to include, as you said, housing, because the relationship between transportation and housing is so tight, but also impacts each other in such strong ways. For example, the higher housing prices get here in Tacoma, the more people move out to the suburbs or further, creating more congestion, creating a longer commute for themselves, which it has a health impact on individuals, but then just makes I-5, River Road, everything just more congested. And the less transit we have, the less we can support folks in making those moves. So the connection between the two, we have to always be talking about those together. And I keep bringing up that health piece too, because all of these choices that we make from a policy level impacts individuals' health and then the health of the community too. So
Can you give me an example of that? Like,
on the health side?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's tons of studies that show the longer your commute, the less healthy you are. There's higher risk of diabetes, heart attacks. As you might imagine, it just adds more sedentary time to your day, right?
Right. Intuitively,
Yeah.
that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, if I'm on the road on I-5 for an hour and a half, 2 hours one way, I'm stressed out, and we all know stress causes a lot of health impacts, but being sedentary for that amount of time. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, we all know I-5's not moving any more quickly these days than it has in the past. So anything we can do to invest in transit to get people off of the road, it affects our economy as well, right? We've got all these trucks trying to get into the port daily, in and out of the port. They're moving more slowly with the rest of us. So the more we can get commuters to be using other options to keep trucks and the economy moving makes a difference as well.
Sure.
So, it's all connected. And this is, as you said, I've been the executive director at Downtown on the Go since 2011. Started out as a program of the chamber and then has moved to an independent nonprofit. Grown from 1 employee to now 5 full-time equivalent, 6 people. Just have a great team working on multimodal transportation and walking, biking, transit.
Yeah.
That's our bread and butter, and will continue to be. But how do we connect walking, biking, transit to jobs, to housing, to health, to community, and using an equity lens to look at how easy it is for someone in one part of the city to get to work versus another part of the city. So we've expanded, I think, in a really natural way to better serve the needs of Tacoma, but it's also been really exciting to partner with different agencies who are stepping up and into this work in new ways as well, and we've been able to support that work. So, and as downtown has grown and more people live downtown, there's more people asking for options too. So
well, so that is a super deep, rich knowledge that you bring to the council. And so I know that you will be serving on some regional bodies that dig into the transportation, housing, economy balance.
Yeah, so Puget Sound Regional Council's Transportation Policy Board is...
Very sexy name.
So many acronyms. That is the regional body that looks at transportation and how we work as a region versus staying in our silo as a city. So that sort of fits into that breaking down the silos between...
and they will fund transportation projects around the Puget Sound region.
Yeah.
So our Tacoma's representation on that
makes a huge difference.
Really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So that work at that regional body, in addition to the work that Mayor Woodard's does with the Sound Transit Board, connected to our Pierce Transit Board, all of those pieces make such a big difference in how you get around the region. Because we know, your transportation doesn't stop at the edge of Tacoma or Pierce County.
Right.
And we know that there are so many people commuting in and out of Tacoma for jobs, and most of those folks commuting out of Tacoma every morning. So we know regional transportation is so important. So I'm really proud to represent Tacoma in that way.
Well, the more that you can help with our transportation and congestion problems, maybe that will alleviate some of my gray hair and it would go in reverse. Maybe? I won't put that on you. I know one of the other things that you are excited to jump into is Vision Zero. And that is something that has just started to bud on the council. And tell me about that. I don't actually know that much about Vision Zero.
Yeah, so Vision Zero is not new. It's an international concept it's the entire body of work is zero traffic fatalities.
Okay.
So it's a very easy thing to get behind. And this is another thing where we look at the traffic fatalities across the city, and they're disproportionately in some neighborhoods and not others. And so taking a look at that data as we implement things. But it's slowing speeds down. It's making it easier to cross the street, particularly looking at kids, youth, and the traffic patterns and investments around schools.
Okay.
So safe routes to schools fits right into that same body of work. And really, as we're developing this policy, I really want to make sure that there is that equity piece there so that we're not just investing in more crosswalks, we're making sure that those crosswalks are invested across the city. And that's what's so beautiful about that equity index, about what the council did with the health and all policies a couple years ago, what the council did this last year with the aging cities proclamation, resolution, that they did. All of those pieces add up to let's look across the city at how we're investing in transportation and looking at who it's for. There's a great group called 8 to 80 Cities. If it's not safe for your 8-year-old and your 80-year-old relative, it doesn't work. So it's a really simple sort of litmus test to look at how a road works. And it's not saying we don't have cars. It's not saying you can't get around using a vehicle, but it's making sure that there's options for everybody. And transportation is changing all the time, right? We have micro-mobility, which is things like the scooters and the bike share. We have car share, like Zipcar, and we have ride share like Uber and Lyft. We, keep talking about self-driving cars. All of these are sort of part of the bucket of transportation that we have to design for and create policy for. So the Vision Zero really just with that really simple message of zero traffic fatalities, and that's any mode. And we see, especially in the winter, there's been a lot more pedestrian crashes, pedestrian crashes, because it's darker, it's harder to see that the crosswalks are long. So all of those things are part of the work of the Vision Zero policy.
So does our data show that there are parts of town where there are more fatalities than other?
Absolutely.
What is what parts of town?
So and I'm most familiar with the schools data.
Okay.
But I believe that the other data follows the same pattern, but the schools on the east side really are the ones where you see the most collisions and the most fatalities around the schools. And so we've already, as a city, taken the step to invest in the schools that had the highest amount of crashes. So, good work is already being done. The staff is already invested in this concept. But this is just sort of taking that to the next level. And perhaps when we talk about PSRC, when you apply for money at PSRC, they ask
the regional council,
for things like, what are you doing about pedestrian and youth? Like this will help our applications be more successful.
We have data to demonstrate that this is actually where we are going to invest, and it's going to balance the opportunities in our city better. Okay. Which is something that we're looking for. Anything else in transit and transportation? I know you could talk about it all day.
Absolutely.
But I also want to make sure you get the opportunity to talk about some of the other things that brought you to this place on the council.
I think, as you said, I could talk about transportation all day. I think the other big thing that's coming up is potentially more investment in transit, and I'm really excited to support that work and support what Pierce Transit is doing, both with some of their bigger capital investments with the bus rapid transit, but also in just getting more service on the streets, because we know there are so many people, both in our city and our region, that are not served as well as they should be. We need bus service every 15 minutes, and there are many, many routes that are not even close to that. So whatever I can do as a council member to support that work will be really, really important to me.
Excellent.
Part of the system.
As a bus rider myself, I appreciate it. I appreciate, and I love the 8 to 80 concept. I once upon a time took a trip with my 8-year-old and my 80-year-old grandma, and let me tell you, if you can make it across country with an 8 and an 80-year-old, then that's awesome. Then you're a survivor. I want to dig in a little bit more about your history and what brought you to this seat on the council. Like, what was your first inspiration that you thought, I want to sit in that seat?
Well, you look in hindsight, and I think there's a lot of things that influenced me, and I didn't realize at the time. I just met with some folks from Copenhagen, and one of them worked at the school that I went to in Copenhagen, and I took a class on European Union politics from an elected official in college. At the time, I had no desire or realization that I would want to serve. But I think things like that, and it was a female local council member who taught the class. And so I think some of those things sort of happened subconsciously. I had a number of, particularly the women who had served on Tacoma City Council, who sat me down over the years and said, you should think about this. This would be a really great idea. Or you'd be really great at this. You should, put it on your list. And so, I'd started to think about this might be something I would like to do in a place that my skill set would bring value. Probably over the last 4 or 5 years, but it was always something that maybe I would do in the future. I have little kids, I can't do that. And then knowing that the at-large position was open this year because of the term limits that Ryan Mello was term limited out, started thinking about, who's going to serve in that spot. And so started to kind of think about it. And I
just have to touch on your comment about maybe I'll do this in the future. That is such a common, actually, the research is that women say that. They say that, no, I don't think I'm ready. And they have to be asked 9 times before they believe I can do that. So you started to reflect on that. You started to hear that voice.
For sure. And one of the big things for me was last January, as I was still kind of thinking about it, but wasn't for sure. So I got the New York Times that had all the women who had just been elected to Congress. They had a picture of each one of them, where they were from, how they got to Congress. And I mean, it was awesome to see that. But also, I knew that those women had kids and families and jobs and perhaps even bigger challenges than I have. And they still stepped up to serve because they saw the need and saw that they could add value. And so I was really inspired by that. I don't know any of them, but I thought, wow, if they all can do it, I can do city council and see what happens. So it was kind of a combination of being inspired and sort of called to action by the state of the world right now, in my little way here in Tacoma, to step up and serve and see if we can make change to make our city a place for people and, implement policies that are equitable and that people feel welcome here. So all of those things. And then honestly, the thing that I had thought would be the reason not to serve, because I have little kids and I can't possibly find the time, was, I have 2 girls, and wouldn't it be awesome for them to see what's possible? And it has been so cool. My oldest is a 2nd grader, and she knows more about Tacoma City Council than I knew as a high schooler. She can tell you
well, you didn't have a mom that was serving on the council, so
she can tell you everyone who ran, who won, what it was like on election night, and then what changed later with some of those races that flipped. And so it's really been fun to see her just sort of the understanding. And I don't think, if you don't go into politics at all, my kids, it's that's such an important thing to know, how your city government works. So I'm really proud about that. And I think that like I said, the thing that I thought was the reason not to run became the reason to run. Yeah.
I think that role modeling is really, we know that role modeling is really important and impactful.
Yeah.
When I was a little girl, right, in 1970 something, the role models in front of me were teachers and nurses. That's what women did. So naturally, my kindergarten picture of what I want to be when I grow up is I want to be a teacher or a nurse.
Yeah.
But now little girls draw pictures of councilwomen, congresswomen, of course the doctors and the lawyers and the astronauts and the
It's
and the
really
engineers
exciting.
And so it is a very exciting.
And still, I mean, there are 4 of us out of 9 on the council now that are female. There are 2 people of color out of 9. I mean, still not representative of our community. We need to do better. We need to make it easier to run for office. We need to break down some of those barriers and encourage more people to run. So I don't know how that will manifest it in my work as a council member, but I'm really excited about helping other people see their future in elected office as well.
Absolutely. Do you think there are different skills that are you finding in getting along with the rest of your council colleagues? I know you're so early in it. Different skills to bring to the table, or?
I mean, I think it's probably a little bit early for me to reflect on that, but I do think so much of working on city council is working together with your colleagues, and the way we pass policy is working together and working through policy issues and disagreements to get to a place where we can all feel good about what we're working on. So I think so much of council is a team sport, is a group project. So I think that's important to keep in mind. I think on the campaign trail, you spend all that time, 5-6 months telling people what your vision is, and really it's the community's vision, and it's working together with my colleagues on the council. So I'm excited to do that. I think that's really an art of balancing all of that and figuring out and sort of teasing out those things that really are important to people, so that we can work together. Because I often think there's more in common than there is. There are differences, and it's just sometimes about sort of teasing those out and figuring out where we do align. So I'm excited about that work. So ask me again later.
Well, you've been in this work for a long time, so I have no doubt that you will continue to thrive. And it is a team sport as well. The whole staff and the whole community, I think, we all want to support you in succeeding. We're really pleased to have you. So looking forward to the work that you're going to be doing. We could keep talking, I think, all day, but we'll save some of these things for later on in the year. Maybe you'll come back to Inside Tacoma.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Well,
thank you.
Councilmember Walker, I want to thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
I want to thank you all for being with us on Inside Tacoma. I'm Elisa O'Hanlon. Please join us again.